All right, so Genesis 18. We are, I'm going to tell you this, we are in our last week of Genesis. We've almost been in Genesis for a year. And we have like 20-some chapters left. And Aaron was like, dude, are we going to be done with Genesis soon? It's like, well, I have been thinking God's been putting something on my mind. I feel like I'm supposed to be teaching. He's like, perfect, let's do it. So we're gonna wrap up with Genesis 18 today and maybe come back to it next year and finish it out. But this will be it. And August is next week. We're already in August. I don't know if you guys, it's happening, and school's starting in a couple days after that. When do you start school? The 6th? Well, the teachers are back on the 6th, but school starts on what? The 8th. Why are you looking at me like I'm 2 days off? Yes. So school's starting, and so we thought we'd start a new series in preparation for the fall. Like it's kind of like a new year. So we're going to jump into that next week. But let's finish with Genesis 18. How about that? Does anybody remember when we started Genesis? Was it October? Was it August? Oh my gosh, we have been doing this for a year. And we're only 18 chapters in. Woo! 18, Genesis 18, verse 1. See what you're missing, Lenny? A year, and we can't even finish a book. Genesis 18. Who's got me? Verse 1.
Tree. The Lord appeared to him by the oaks of
Mamre, something. Mm-hmm.
As he sat at the door of the tent in his heat of the...
Excellent. So today I'm going to ask just a bunch of questions. And let's kind of dig into some of the stuff. What do you notice? What sticks out as you read that verse? It was hot, right? Where are they? They're in the desert. Has anybody been to the Middle East? In that area? Where were you at? Okay. Does it get hot there? It's like Arizona, but like times 2, I heard, right? Like it's just awful. And I've been to Israel in that area, and it gets hot, like really hot. And Arizona, like you don't just stand out in the desert. Like, well, you were there in August, right? What's it like?
The lady at the restaurant said it's like roaches. You only come out at night.
There's a reason north of California is called that mountain. There's nothing to do about that.
Yes, it's awful. Yeah, right. So he's underneath the oak tree, right? Why is he underneath the tree? To shade, right? Obviously, this basic thing, it's cool. There's something about this. Verse 2. What does verse 2 say?
Abraham looked up and saw 3 men standing nearby. When he saw them, he hurried from the entrance of his tent to meet them and bowed low to the ground.
Okay, so connect these two together, 1 and 2. He's sitting. He notices and he gets up and he ran. What stands out? We have to go back to last week. Why does this stand out? What happened just a couple days ago? Do you remember? What were we talking about? Remember, Corey was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you brought this up in front of my kids. He was just circumcised. This story, we see chapters and like, oh, it's a new chapter, so it's a different time period. Remember, in Hebrew, there's no chapters. This is a continuous story. So he was just circumcised. And in the Hebrew, it says 3 people can also be 3 days and all this other stuff. So the rabbis and everybody says, like, this is like within days. Abraham is sitting under a tree in the heat of the day after circumcision. What would you be doing? Pretty much just, yeah, there's no ice. Where's the pea bag, right? There's no frozen peas in this story, right? There's just no such thing. So what are you doing 3 days after circumcision? You're nothing. You're finding shade and saying, God, help me. Meditating, praying, whatever he's doing. And so what stands out as we read, let me read this again. Ready? So he lifted his eyes and looked and saw 3 men standing opposite him. And when he saw them, he ran to the tent door to meet them, and he bowed himself to the ground. What stands out?
Some physical, like physical.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as you read this verse, like what immediately pops to your mind? Yeah.
Very often that we run out and meet our guests at their car door.
Uh-huh. Very good.
It's like, oh, they're here. So we run outside.
Okay, so it sticks out. Like, you're like, wait a second, how is he running? Like this is crazy. Now, also, Eastern culture, we have to recognize this too. In Eastern culture, a man of influence, a man of power, you never see him run. They don't run. That's why the story of the prodigal son is really big deal. Because what is the prodigal son? The father does what? He ran. And everybody in that time frame listening to the story is like, whoa. Because when you have power and authority and that type of prestige and esteem, you don't run. So here's Abraham. He just got circumcised. He's sitting in shade, trying to relax, and these strangers show up, and he gets up and he runs to them.
Just like you're laying down in the shade and you see some strangers and you start just like running.
Yeah. So let's keep going. Verse 3 through 7, Alex.
And said, O Lord, if I have found favor in your sight, do not pass by your servant. Let a little water be brought, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree. While I bring a morsel and bread, that you may refresh yourselves, and after that you may pass on. Since you have come to your servant, so they said, do as you have said. So
7.
And Abraham went quickly into the tent and told Sarah and said, quick, 3 seahs of fine flour, knead it and make cakes. Abraham ran to the herd and took a calf, tenured, and gave it to the young man who prepared it quickly.
Great. All right, what stands out? What do you question? What do you look at? What do you think of like, oh gosh, this is interesting. What is this? What pops out?
It's time to make bread.
It's a terrible time to make bread, right? Okay.
They don't prefer flowers.
Right? So this is a cultural thing, though. In today's world, like, when you want bread, it's got to be instant. But this is Eastern culture. It's kind of like the military. Hurry up and wait, right? You wait. You do these things where an engagement with somebody isn't like a 30-minute lunch or a half hour, it's hours. I mean, how long does it take to make bread, Walt? At least 3 hours. How long does it, my butcher's in here, he knows about animals. How long does it take to butcher an animal and cook it? Hours, right? So this engagement isn't like, hey, stop over for lunch and we're going to chat. These guys are there for a while. What else stands out?
His eagerness to serve strangers.
His eagerness to serve strangers. Excellent. Okay? What else?
Basically said, come eat, and then go on your way.
Kind of. Not yet, though. No, he didn't kick him out.
Well, no, I'm not saying he kicked him out, but he said, and then go on your way. Yeah, number 5.
And let me bring you a piece of bread and refresh your hearts, and then go on for this. For this is why you have come to your servant. And then go on. So maybe he's like, hey, before you go on, we're going to stop. Nothing quick, because obviously it takes 3 hours to bake bread and several hours to butcher. Okay? Did anybody question, what's 3 seahs? What?
7 quarts.
Yeah, how many pounds? I looked it up. It's 60 pounds of flour. How much bread can you make with 60 pounds? 27 loaves. Well, in general, 27 loaves of bread they made. He asked his wife, make all this bread. For how many people? 3. Okay. But still, There's 3 people. We make all this bread for them. How much do you serve somebody? And a whole calf. How many people can you serve with a calf? So what does this tell us about this guy? Sitting in the sun of the day? I don't think so, right? He's just out there like not a care in the world.
More than enough.
What?
I mean, just the phrase more than enough. Like, more, I mean, as much as you need plus more.
As much as you need plus more. So connecting to what you said just a couple minutes ago, this is a guy who understands what? Hospitality. What is hospitality?
Making somebody comfortable.
Wait, to the same time, what'd you say?
Making somebody comfortable in your home.
Okay, what'd you say? Welcoming somebody, make you feel comfortable. And what does he display? Not just making you feel comfortable, what does he display? Well, I'm staying on the same topic though. Not just making you feel comfortable, but an overwhelming. I'm going to give you more than you actually need. Who does that today? Like, you want a Coke? I mean, if Rusty comes to my house and says, hey, can I get a Diet Coke? Am I bringing out a keg for him? I mean, that would be like the equivalent. Like, here's a Diet Coke. You're like, I just want a Coke, right? No, I'm going to give you 70, gallons right here. Like, I'm going to give you enough Diet Coke to keep you here, right? Because connected to this hospitality is also a form of generosity too. I'm giving this to you. This is your bread. You take it. You gotta go on here. Take this with you. I'm giving you milk, right? I'm gonna soothe your heat. When I was being generous and hospitality is something that for thousands of years became an essential part of life in the Eastern culture. It used to be something that we used to talk about in our country here in the South. What was it called? Yeah. See, it was hard. Like, you're like one of the few people that even knows that anymore, right? Do we even talk about Southern hospitality anymore? Why not? It's fake?
Fading.
Oh, it's fading. Why is it fading? Oh, us Yankees brought it? Yeah. It's our fault.
We've talked about this the other day. Culture has just changed so much.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean this is a negative, it's not sound negative. We no longer have respect for traditions. We're talking about that you wouldn't walk into a house with a hat on. Not everybody wears a ball cap all the time, When I was growing up, and still today with my wife, if somebody comes over, even if it's my daughter, she gets freaked out because she hasn't got food prepared for her. That's the culture.
And your daughter comes from not you, but your wife, which is an Eastern culture. Because in the East, this is preeminent. It's like the most important way you can live. And we in the West in America follow what happens a lot of times in the predecessors before us, like Europe. What's happening in Europe is a good indication of what our country looks like. And I remember going to Europe 20 years ago. I was going to the Czech Republic, and I was noticing, like, this is different. Like, the way people treat people. Like, we would stand in line, and we would wait in line, and people at the customs office would, literally, crowd around you and move in front of you to, there was no, civility to it. There was no, hey, I'm going to wait behind you because you were here first. They were like, F you, I'm jumping in. And that was 20 years ago. I went there, obviously a few weeks ago. It's not much different. But one of the things that I really, really noticed is I would walk into these large buildings and I would take pictures and videos, and the architecture was beautiful. And it was museum-ish, it was millions of dollars. And these buildings are probably 5, 6, maybe 1,000 years old, these buildings. And they're absolutely beautiful. And they're empty, and they're only used for people to come in and take pictures. You know what those buildings are? They were churches. They were churches. They were places where people came and worshiped God, and now they are empty. And the culture in Europe, in its faith, is almost non-existent. And that goes for the the Protestant Catholic Church. I even went to, in 3 different cities, I went to the Jewish synagogue. I wanted to see what these were like, and it was the same exact thing. Faith in Europe is dead.
Our churches, and that's
Well, the buildings are not necessary, but just statistically, the buildings were connected for so many people to those faith. There aren't, like, statistically, the faith in Europe is lower than ours. What is the faith? How many people in our country go to church today? Do you remember that stat? How many people in our country go to church once a week? It's about 30% of the country who attends. That doesn't mean that they're faithful. That just means that they attend some type of community of faith.
Look at even Israel. I mean, if there's going to be a religious place, that would be it, right? And they have some of the same numbers. People that actually worship people themselves. Crazy.
It is crazy. And so as we get back to Abraham, like, how does this apply to Abraham? When I was in Israel, there was another person that I studied under, but I didn't get to go on one of his trips. His name was Ray Vanderlaan. But there was a guy that I know that was on one of his trips. And he said when he was with Ray, they were walking through the desert, which I didn't get a chance to do. Like, who wants to walk through the desert? I don't know if I would have wanted to be on that trip. But they were walking through this desert from place to place. And they came upon this village that was, about a mile away. So they're walking through the desert a mile to this village. It's just this small little tiny village. And the guy said, as we were walking about a half mile out, they saw these little kids, 5, 6, 10-year-old kids come running out to them. There's about 50 of these people taking this trip with Ray Vanderlaan. And these kids encircle them and they're talking to them in Arabic. Nobody knows what they're saying, right? They don't speak Arabic and they don't speak English. And so it's like, blah, 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 nobody knows what's going on. So the kids are like bringing them in, and Ray's like, come on. And so they walk to this woman's house where a lot of these kids come from. And the woman kind of speaks very little English, and so Ray speaks a little bit, and they had somebody else that could translate a little bit. And she's like, come on in, come into the house. And she brought them to this patio, and there's 50 of them, and she gives each one of them a glass cup of tea, right? And so she makes this homemade tea, and she's making bread, and they're sitting there, and they're talking. I mean, first of all, as I was listening to the story, I'm like, who has 50 glasses in your house? Your mom. But this woman, it's poor small village, right? She's got 50 glasses that they're making tea for all of these people, these strangers. And then she makes them bread, and she's just serving them, and they're kind of trying to have a conversation, but it's very broken and it's very hard. And so they're having these conversations. And as I'm listening to this story, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like, this is phenomenal generosity. Like, I mean, did anybody like give her money? Did anybody like pay her for this stuff or like leave a gift? And the guy who was telling me this said, then Ray looked over to everybody and he said, look, whatever you do, don't anyone offer her money. And I heard that. I was like, oh, I was just thinking I should offer money. And the guy asked the same question that I asked, like, why not? And he said, because this is an act of worship for her. This is an act of worship. Here's this Muslim woman talking to these Christian, white people from America, doesn't have anything in common with them. What is different from the story from Genesis that we just read?
Was that not, like you asked what stuck out? Like, I missed last week, but it talks about God, I feel like, re-promising Isaac's birth. And to me, like, he's had to promise Abraham a couple times that he's going to have a child and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
He gets circumcised. I feel like he was just, like, whenever it says, like his eyes, he lifted up his eyes and looked. And, like, isn't that a thing, like, kind of sitting in your crap, and then, like, you're kind of raised up to look up from the ground?
He lift up your eyes.
Lift up your eyes,
Mm-hmm.
like kind of be redeemed by somebody. Would that not, like, I would imagine he was sitting there in pain underneath a tree and just kind of, God has promised me something over and over again, and I keep, like, having Ishmael, like keep
Mhm.
not believing it, and then you get an opportunity to be hospitable or something like that.
The interesting part, because like Abraham's one of those people who had, as we talked about last year, hadn't heard from God for 13 years. And so we talked about this last week. Like, what do you do when you don't feel like you feel or hear God? Like, how many people give up or quit or like backslide or whatever you want to call it? Like, they go back to what they're used to because maybe God doesn't want me to do this anymore. Maybe I misheard God. But one of the things that we see about Abraham is part of his character throughout this whole story is that he's faithful and he will stick with his convictions and with what he believes God tells him to do. And so when we get to this passage, he's like in pain and he lifts up his eyes. And the interesting commentary that so many rabbis, there's hundreds of rabbis that comment on this, a lot of them saying like that these angels came down and they healed him at that moment. He lifted up his eyes and he was healed, which was what allowed him to get up and run. I don't know, it doesn't say that in the text, but I can see how they make that assumption. Because how do you get up and run after that? There's one thing to like get fixed and not be able to have kids anymore, but that's different than circumcision. I can't even imagine being 99 years old and getting circumcised. Like that just makes me hurt thinking about it.
I didn't hear last week because of the technical difficulty, but there's a thing called the dark night that they talk about from a mystical standpoint, that you connect with God, not in your five senses, because He no longer wants you at that level, He wants you at a different level. He could so easily apply it to Abraham. His dark night is 13 years, and then he's at a supernatural level now with the angels.
Could be. Mm-hmm. And we see the meditation practices of Abraham where he encounters God. So how much of this encountering God is through visions and then literally these angels coming before him? Yeah, that's...
Do you think, because you're talking a lot about 10 things in last, so is it the thought that he didn't realize that people were special, this is what he would have done for anybody? Or
All right, well, I'm glad you brought that up because I'm going to point to you right here. Maybe you know this passage. Tell me if you remember this. And when the Son of Adam comes in his esteem, and all the set-apart messengers with him, then he shall sit on the throne of his esteem. And all the nations shall be gathered before him, and he shall separate one from another as a shepherd separates his sheep from goats. And he shall set the sheep on his right hand, and he shall set the goats on his left hand. Then the king shall say to those on his right hand, "Come, you blessed by your Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. And naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me." Then the righteous shall answer him, saying, "Master, when? When did we see you hungry and feed you? When did we see you thirsty and give you drink? And when did we see you a stranger and take you in? Or naked and clothe you? And when did we see you sick or in prison and we came to you?" And the king shall answer and say to them, "Truly I say to you, insofar as you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers, you did it to me." Does it matter?
no.
So let me ask you.
I was just trying to figure out your mindset when you were going through it.
But I think that's the point, right? It's just a story, and I think Jesus connects that story to this story, and you had written on your wall, the whiteboard, for a year and a half. What did it say? Do you remember what? No, not that one. Before Avodah, you had this passage written with a question. Are you a sheep or a goat?
In the culture that Abraham lived in, he was taught about the hospitality. So when this took place, right, and he'd seen him, it's almost like the song we were singing in gratitude, right?
Mm-hmm.
All I had to give you, right? And so all he had, right, his best was in his hospitality. And in his hospitality, he was generous. But this is something that he had and he was able to bring Because when he bowed down before them and he said, "My Lord,"
Mhm.
you know, he put them in a place, very high.
And that's where it's hard to see because the word for Lord there is Yod He Vav He. So this is where it goes back to what you were saying. Like, is this in the midst of a meditative vision that becomes reality? Or like, and this is where we have to recognize that we don't have to take this as literal. It's a story. What is the point of the story that we are trying to get out of this? God encounters Abraham at this moment. He recognizes, but he also, Abraham, before we even recognize him, maybe he's like the idea of generosity and hospitality overwhelms him. And this is the point that we're trying to get. And this is the point that for thousands of years, whether you are Jewish, Christian, or Islam, all three of these understood the story as the same thing. That hospitality is king. Because you don't know, as Jesus has said, you don't know who you're serving.
So, and like you even told a story about the woman, right? That all of this hospitality, right, is worship.
Correct. Is an act of worship, which is what we just saw from Yeshua, right?
He brought the best he had to bring.
Right. And so we live in a world today where hospitality, I think, has been taken over by isolation. Time spent with people has decreased over the last 20 years horribly. In fact, one study, lacking social connection is as dangerous as smoking 15 packs of cigarettes a day. I'm sorry, packs. 15 cigarettes. That would be a lot of smoking, wouldn't it? Yeah, that'd be a lot. But still, how many cigarettes are in a pack? Okay, so almost a pack a day is where we are in our culture today because of isolation, social engagement with friends, companionship, household, family social engagement. Social isolation has increased exponentially, and social engagement with others is like plummeting. We are living in this world of isolation. And what have I said? What have you heard me said? Beat this drum. What has that created in our culture today? Depression, anxiety, suicide. Are these connected? Could they be connected to the fact that we no longer know how to be hospitable to people and want to engage people that we don't know? Are these connected at all? When we live in a world of isolation, can we even notice the people around us? When all we do is walk down the street like this, I can't even see Jesus or somebody that God has sent to put in my path that I can help because my eyes are focused on this. Hosea 6 says this. Hosea 6:6. For I delight in loving commitment and not slaughtering, and in the knowledge of Elohim more than ascending offerings. There are rituals then that we still have today, that we get sucked into these rituals of the stuff that I have to do all the time. I have to go to church. I have to do this. I have to do these things. And they become meaningless and empty. And all of a sudden they're rote. And I just keep doing these rituals, but they don't mean anything to me. Which is why Hosea gets this message from God. I delight in loving commitment. What's the word for loving commitment in Hebrew? Chesed. Chesed is this idea that there's these four meanings to it, but just the concrete handlebars. Hesed is someone who provides shelter for the homeless, gives food to the hungry, assistance to the poor, visits the sick, gives comfort to mourners, and provides burial for all. Hesed is a part of hospitality because I see the person in need. I see the stranger. Can you see the people in need around you? Do you have any idea who's hurting, who's mourning, who's in need, who's struggling financially? Do you even know? Or have we lost that connection to even ask or know those things? I want to provide for your needs. Why? Because this could be exactly what God wants me to do. Or because this could be God in front of me.
I say this all the time to people. It's like, you don't know what that person is going through.
Uh-huh.
They can look like everything's okay, just going about their business, but you just don't know what that person is going through.
Right. Every day. Working in the coffee house, and we have this industry over here that is all about customer service. And that's one of the things we tell every day. Like, when people come to get coffee, yeah, they're getting coffee, but you don't know what they're coming in with, what baggage they're bringing in. They just got in a fight with their husband. They had a flat tire. The kid had a baby blowout and poops all over them, right? They're frustrated because they got to get to work. They're frustrated because they hate their job. And so what do they want from you? They don't want just your coffee. They want you to give them a smile and make them feel like, hey, you're loved here today.
Me and I went to get my hair cut yesterday, and in talking to the barber, I told him, I said, I have a brand new set, 2 sets of clippers. I could have cut my hair, making sure. I said, it doesn't matter, it's going to go back to me. I said, but I don't come here just for that.
Mm-hmm.
I said, I come here, right? I said, because of the relationship and the fellowship. Because I said, you have such an opportunity to make a difference in people's lives because of all the people come in.
Yeah.
And they're going to talk. And you can guide them. You can just point them right in good ways and everything. So it was a great conversation, but it went along that same thing. That it was about the relationship and the fellowship, and not just a service getting a haircut.
And that's the thing. The next verse, it's not just about the work. Because at work, you can feel like, well, this is my job. I have to do this. Micah, the next passage. Micah 6:8. He has declared to you, oh man, what is good? And what does Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh require of you? But to do right and to love chesed and to walk humbly with your God. The previous verse talked about just chesed. This says to love chesed. What does that mean? It's not just your job. You should have a desire, a heart-longing desire to give chesed to somebody. It's part of my joy. I love what I do. I'm going to not just do this at work. I got to do this to my friends, my neighbors, the people that text me. How can I encourage them? How can I love you? How can I give to you? How can I serve you? I love this. That's what life is all about. That's what God requires of you. This is His command. Oh man, what does the Lord like? What does God want me to do? What is God expecting me to do? Where's my path? Where's my journey? What am I supposed to do? Here's your path, right here. Love chesed. You want fulfillment in your life? You want joy in your life? Love chesed. I was reading a book recently, and I learned something. It said this. It said, culture. What is culture? When we think about culture around us, we think about the gathering culture, we think about St. Bernard culture, we think about New Orleans culture. There's all these ideas about culture. And the Latin word for culture is cultus. Cultus translated in English means care. In this culture, the culture of this gathering place right here, do we have culture? Do we actually care about people? Because that's the definition. Caring for somebody means that you love chesed, that you look for and long for ways to love somebody, to help somebody. Kindness, hospitality, chesed, it all comes from here. Rabbi Sacks sums it up when he said this. He said, kindness brings redemption to the world. It's a powerful quote. Do we live a life of kindness? Do we live a life of chesed? Because that is the true magnet of people. I pray that you can think about that this week and and ask yourself on a daily basis, every day. I'm going to ask you on next Saturday, where did you have an opportunity to display chesed? Father, we thank you for this morning. We thank you for this Sabbath. We thank you for these challenging questions. We thank you for the conviction of hospitality. We pray, Lord, that we leave here today with our eyes and our hearts open, that as we encounter a friend, a neighbor, a stranger, that we recognize that at any one of these moments, it could be you standing before us. May we live a life of absolute chesed and generosity. May we be love to those who need it. And we praise your holy name. Amen.